Hello everybody and welcome to our level 3 math tutorial. Now, this tutorial, we're going to use a special feature on Keynote, and so I want to start by just showing you how that feature works. So we're going to use an animation, and it's actually a slide transition called Magic Move. And what this is going to allow us to do is take an object and have it move from one place to another, change color, or just interact with or have a start and end point between slides. So let me show you what I mean. If I put a square in the top left corner and I want it to start there, and then on the next slide, I want this square to have moved, gotten larger, and changed color. Well, I can just set the start point. It's going to start right here. I've used this magic move transition, and then the end point is right here. And so let's see what happens when we play this. So here's where the square starts. And when we move, you can see it's going to move, grow, and change color right in time as we're transitioning. And so this is somewhat abstract right now, but I'll show you how you can use this to make a really incredible looking math video lesson. And today we'll do that on how to introduce students to the concept of a fraction. And so before we get started, let's format our slides so they look a little bit nicer. I'm going to edit this slide, and let's edit a blank slide and just give it a nice blue background. That's pretty good. So let's add in that blank slide that we want. Perfect. And the reason we're going to do this is it's going to let us set what we can draw as a piece of paper on top of this. And we're going to get a nice contrast between the piece of paper where we'll write out the problem and the blue background. So to make our piece of paper, let's add a rectangle, and we'll give a little bit of a border on this one, but we will drag this rectangle off the page, and paper is obviously white. And now I'm going to make it so that these edges are a little bit more rounded. I think that'll look a little bit nicer. So I will right click on this white rectangle. I'm going to make it editable, and we're going to round these corners. Now, the way I recommend doing this is we're going to click in the middle and then drag one of these center points close to the edge, and we're going to make it a sharp point. We're going to do the same thing on top. So we'll click at the center, drag that midpoint, and make it a sharp point. And then we're going to make a smooth point out of the corner. And that's initially going to pop it out, kind of like this weird bulge. But if we just drag that inwards, what we end up with is this nice rounded piece of paper that I think looks a lot better. So let's do that to the other side of our paper. So we'll do the same thing. We'll drag that corner, make it a sharp point. We'll drag this corner, make it a sharp point, and we'll smooth out the very top left corner and drag it down. There. So we've got this nice rounded piece of paper. It's looking good. But obviously, paper also has those lines going through it. And so let's draw those lines onto this piece of paper. So I'll do that. I'll add in some lines. And the first one I think of is the one that comes down the left-hand side for the margins. And I'll draw it right about there. You can kind of eyeball what looks right. Let's make it 5 points thickness. And so it doesn't interfere so much with the actual problem solving. Let's make this very, very light. So it's just like a background. So let's make it a very light gray, just like that. Now, obviously, we have all of the lines that are going horizontally as well. So let's duplicate that line and set up a horizontal line. And we'll leave a little bit of space, just like you would have at an actual white piece of paper. And we'll drag that out until we could see, and we could double check that it's really filled perfectly to the edges of our piece of paper. That looks pretty good. Now, rather than having to space out each one of these lines, I'm going to show you a trick to make all of the lines on your paper space out evenly. So we're going to duplicate a whole bunch of these lines. I don't know, maybe 10 or 15. And the last one, we will take and just drag down just off the bottom of the page. Now I'm going to highlight all of the lines. So I'll click and drag, And then I'm going to unclick the white background. So the only thing I've selected are these lines. And I'm going to right click, and we're going to align all of these on the left-hand side. Now that's going to snap all of the lines so they're all correctly lined up with each other. And now all we need to do is distribute them vertically or up and down so that they're equally spaced. So again, I'll highlight everything, unhighlight the white piece of paper. We just want the lines right now. Right click, and we're going to distribute this vertically. And just like that, we have this amazing looking piece of paper that we can use for our video lesson. Now I'm going to group all of this together just so it is a singular object I can work with. And now I could click and move this piece of paper wherever I want. And so I'm actually going to start by using that magic move transition to make a really cool title screen. So I'm going to create 2 slides. And in this first slide, I'm going to start with the paper just off the screen. So you're not going to see the paper on this slide, but it's going to end all the way up here. And so again, we're going to turn on that magic move transition. And you can see how that's going to make the paper slide up onto the page. So I'm going to speed that up a bit. Let's do 0.5 seconds. And that's going to look pretty cool. Now on this first slide, I do want to have some title or some introduction, not just this blue screen. So let's go and add a custom shape. And I'll start by just putting a triangle that's slightly out of the window, so it's not actually going to all be showing those sharp edges. And then I could kind of drag it and just make a swirly figure that looks somewhat interesting. And let's give it some contrast. So let's format this and fill it in with a dark blue. How about something like this? That looks great. I'm going to turn off the border so it's just like that. And amazing, we've got this nice little contrast that we can use to now add in our title. So for this video, we're going to be focusing on identifying fractions. And that black text, though, doesn't look super good. So let's make it white text. Let's bold it, or let's just make it larger for now. Let's do 125. Change the font. And I'm actually going to put an enter between them. We'll just make this so it's stacked vertically. I'll add a little more contrast. I'll bold the word identifying, just so it has a little bit of contrast between the 2 words. And now let's underline all of this. So I'll grab a shape, and for my underline, I'm going to use this rounded rectangle. I like the way it looks. If I make it really thin, just like this, it looks like a nice rounded underline that we can use. And I'm going to make this, let's tighten it up a little bit, make it a little bit thicker, and let's make this a nice yellow color. That's looking pretty good, maybe a little bit thinner. Great. So now I'll highlight all that, group it together, just so I have a nice single object. And now we can see I have this great presentation, a title slide, and then my paper pulls up into the lesson. So now we can actually start focusing on the math. Let's start by typing out our problem. What fraction does this model represent? And so we're going to draw a fraction 1/4 on a circular model. And so we'll be guiding students through how to identify that. So we'll go ahead and make our title a little bit larger so it's easier to see. And now let's start drawing out the model. So we're going to use a circular model. So I'll put a big circle on the middle of my page. And I want this to be clear so I can see the different pieces of it. So I'm going to turn off my fill and just add a border. Let's do a 10-point border. Now we need to split this. We're going to do 1/4. So I'll split the circle into fourths by adding lines that I can put coming down vertically. We'll make that also 10-point thickness. And we're going to add one horizontally as well. A little trick is when I am creating these lines, I hold the Shift key, which helps me ensure my line is either vertical or perfectly horizontal. And now that looks pretty good. But in this lesson, I might want to move around one of these pieces. Let's say I want to highlight the one piece that's shaded. And right now, it's all one big circle. So that's not going to work super well. So even though I've just drawn the circle, I'm also going to actually build out each individual fourth of the circle. And I'll do that with a custom shape. So I'm going to click at the top. We're going to come down to the middle, out to the left-hand side, and connect it into this triangle. Make sure it's looking all neat. And then just drag that out to complete the quarter or the fourth of the circle. Now let's add in a color fill, and you can see what that would look like. And just so we get some contrast between the blue background, let's make this orange. Perfect. So now I'm actually going to fill in with white the other non-shaded fourths of the circle. And rather than having to create one of these pieces every time, I'll just duplicate it. And under Arrange, I'll flip it over. There's my other fourth. Perfect. Now I'm going to take both of those pieces, duplicate both of them, and let's flip those upside down. Now I've got my entire circle. Perfect. And obviously, we can fine-tune it, make sure that this is all 100% lined up. That's looking pretty good. And we wanted to have 1/4. So let's turn these last three, instead of filled with orange, we'll fill them with white. And now one thing we've kind of missed is those lines that we'd initially drawn. And so I'll select all four of these pieces. And I'm going to send them backwards, and I'll just click, and as you see, it falls further behind that original circle I've drawn until you really can't tell that each of these pieces exist because their border is covered up by that original circle that we've drawn. Great. So now we can get to work and actually start explaining this problem. I'm going to want to write the fraction somewhere on this slide, and so it would be helpful if I could have this model move over. And I can do that using that same magic move transition. So I'm going to duplicate this slide. The circle will, or the fraction model will start in the middle, but I want it to end somewhere over here on the left. So let's go ahead and drag that and highlight everything. But if you notice, if I do it right now, I by accident grabbed onto the piece of paper. So one little trick is I'm going to right click on the piece of paper and lock it in place. So now I can't move the piece of paper unless I unlock it. And that way I can just drag the circle, move it over to the side. And because this is set with a magic move transition, as we play through, it's going to seamlessly move over to the side, just like that. Great. So I'm actually going to put this just a little bit back. Now let's draw in our fraction. So we'll start with the line that separates the numerator and the denominator. So let's make that a little bit thicker, maybe a 10, yeah, sure, a 10-point thickness. And I'll make it a little wider. And we'll want to have students identify there are two pieces of a fraction. So let's actually draw in those two pieces. We have our numerator. That looks pretty good. And let's turn off the fill. Let's just have this be an outline of the numerator. So there's our numerator. There is our denominator. And let's line this up so that it's nicely in line with a fraction. Great. Now, I don't really like how the background is showing through these, so I'm actually going to fill these with the color white. That looks good. Great. So now we will explain to students that the numerator of a fraction is how many pieces we have. So we'll take that text box and let's center the text. So we'll format it and center it. And then let's put it into the numerator. Great. So students will learn that the number on top is how many pieces we have. And then we should model how to look at this. Well, you know what would be really cool is if the different pieces somewhat moved apart like that, so we could really clearly see them. And I can do that, again, with a magic move transition. So I'm going to copy and paste this slide, and then I'm going to drag out the different pieces of my model right here right here, and right here. And of course, I'm going to get rid of the outline that I have right there. So now we just have those 4 pieces of the circle. And you can see what that will look like right here. It's going to separate the circle through that magic move transition. And so now we could point out to students, well, we just have this one shaded piece. So we'll put a nice big number 1 in here. Let's make it bolded. A little bit bigger. That's good. And that looks great. Now, the next thing will be to show students that this number 1, that's what we write into the numerator. And so what I'll do is I'll actually duplicate this slide because I want this title to kind of move over here. And I want the number 1 to come in and fill the numerator box. Let's make it bigger. Maybe 200. Yeah, 200 looks like a good size. And so now you can see we have this one piece. So we write the number 1 in. That looks pretty good. So the next thing we might want to do is find the denominator. So let's take that text box and duplicate it. And the denominator will be the total number of pieces. That's just like that's good. And we'll, of course, want to label that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. So we still have this 1 right here already. So let's put 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alrighty? And just like we did with the numerator, we're going to duplicate this slide using a magic move transition. So this label, the total number of pieces, can come over. And we'll put that denominator 4 right into our problem. So there we go. And I'm actually going to go ahead. We'll get rid of the fractions on that slide. And let's see what this looks like. We're identifying fractions. What fraction does this represent? Well, here's the fraction. If we split it up, there's 1 piece. The denominator will be 4. So you can see it's getting closer, but we're going to have to round this out with some animations on each slide. And so let's do that starting at the very beginning. So we can start by having the circle appear. So, let's lock in that paper so it doesn't move. And let's take this entire circle and have it appear. So we'll have it all scale in. Actually, just so it doesn't interfere, let's just do a dissolve transition in half a second. And we want it all to appear at the same time. So under build order, let's make all of this appear at the same time. So we'll take everything and connect it with that first build. So it's all one piece. Now after we draw the circle, we will write in our problem. So let's have this fade and move in, just like that. So now our title slide, paper comes up, we draw our fraction, and then we write our problem. Amazing. So now on this slide, the circle, the model will move to the left. And then we want to draw in this fraction. So we want to draw in the numerator slot, the denominator slot, and that line. So let's have both of the numerator and the denominator scale in. We'll do those in 0.3 with a bounce. And let's have this line in the middle, draw in with a line, and we'll do the same 0.3 seconds. Because now we could time all of these animations together, so they're all connected. And that'll look like it just pops into place. Perfect. And now it's not until after that that we want to label the numerator as how many pieces we have. So we will scale in that effect with a 0.3 second bounce. And now you can see we could explain a fraction has 2 pieces. The number on top is how many pieces we have. If we split up our fraction, you can see we have 1. Well, let's animate that 1 so it doesn't appear until we click. So we're going to take the 1 and we're going to add in an animation so it doesn't appear until we click. So now the 1 will appear and then it will move over. But you see we have this problem where all of the other stuff on the slide appears right away. So we're going to change that. Let's make it so that 1, 2, 3, and 4, that's when we're counting up the number of pieces for the denominator. So actually, first we should write in our label. The denominator is the total number of pieces. So we'll add in that with an animation. And then we'll label it 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces we'd count. So let's scale in all of those with an animation. Let's check that our order is correct. So we'll label denominator as total number. Then 1, 2, 3, 4 will appear. Great. And then 4 will come into the denominator of our fraction. And let's add in one final slide. So I'm going to duplicate this again. I'm actually going to get rid of these pieces and just put in the original circle. So I'm going to, rather than having to reassemble it, I'll just copy the fully assembled circle, put it back in. And now let's get rid of these boxes for the numerator and denominator so students can see all they really need is the numbers. And let's change this text so it says 1/4 of the circle is shaded. And let's stretch that out. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So let's bold it. 75. Great. And so now let's see what we have so far. So I'm going to play this presentation from the start. Today we're learning how to identify fractions. Let's start by figuring out what fraction does this model represent. Well, a fraction has two pieces. The number on top tells us how many pieces we have. And when you look at our model, you can see we have one piece that is shaded. So we'll write a number 1 into our numerator. Next, the denominator, or the number on the bottom of our fraction, is the total number of pieces in our shape. Well, we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces in our shape. So we'll write a 4 into the denominator. We could say 1/4 of the circle is shaded. All right, and so you might have noticed that was almost perfect, but there's one little glitch right here where the 4 appeared before the 3. So we'll fix that in the Animate tab, Build Order, and yep, there you can see it was 1, 2, 4, 3. I made a mistake. So let's drag that into the correct order. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. And so we could just check that it now plays correctly. So there's the numerator. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces for the denominator. 1/4 of the circle is shaded. And now we could go on and copy this entire thing to make a second problem. So maybe we will copy all of these slides, duplicate all of them, and we could change it. So we could use a new model. And we could, instead of this circle, maybe we would put in a square and show the fraction 1/3, or we could pick whatever we wanted. And so we won't go through all of that right here, but you would need a little bit of modification then to change all of these images to the new fraction that you create. But the basic idea is that you can copy and paste and reuse a lot of the work and those animations that you've put in. And so I just want to reiterate a couple more things, which is the use of the magic move, which always, the first slide will be where an object starts, and the next slide will be where it ends, and the objects will seamlessly move from place to place. That's why this 1 seamlessly moved over into the numerator. It's why this 4 right here seamlessly moved over into the denominator. And so we can use that magic move transition to create a lot of special effects. And so one more time, we'll look through this. We're identifying fractions. This model, fractions have 2 pieces. The numerator is how many we have. We have 1 piece. The denominator is the total number of pieces. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. So our denominator is 4. 1/4 of the circle is shaded. It's a simple, beautiful introduction to fractions that every student can understand.